Well, a possible sign of a major escalation in the war between Israel and Hamas after the Israeli military launched what it called a targeted raid in northern Gaza. The IDF described the hours-long operation as preparations for, quote, the next stages of combat.
בעזה, כוחות צה"ל בפיקוד חטיבת גבעתי וכוחות נוספים מאוגדה 162 ביצעו הלילה פשיטה קרקעית מתוחמת ויזומה באמצעות טנקים בשטח צפון רצועת עזה. הכוחות חיסלו מחבלים והרסו תשתיות טרור של חמאס בשטח הרצועה. הפשיטה היא חלק מההיערכות שלנו לשלבי המלחמה הבאים.
The army released this footage showing armored vehicles ramming through what appeared to be a border fence. It said its forces had hit several Hamas targets and missile launch positions during the operation before retreating to home soil. The land incursion began hours after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared preparations for a ground war were underway, but failed to provide a specific timeline for when exactly that might happen. His war cabinet partner, Benny Gantz, echoing similar sentiments.
התמרון הוא רק שלב אחד במהלך ארוך טווח שכולל היבטים ביטחוניים, מדיניים וחברתיים שיארכו שנים. המערכה תיכנס בקרוב לשלבים נוספים ובעוצמות גדולות יותר.
Mr. Gantz says while it might take years for security to be restored in Israel's south, his country will not be destroyed. He cautions that that is a fate that confronts Israel's enemies instead. Some 250 Hamas targets in Gaza are believed to have been hit by Israeli airstrikes in the last 24 hours alone. Airstrikes across the besieged enclave show no signs of letting up. Satellite images capture the extent of destruction wreaked across the territory since the start of the war, now almost 3 weeks ago. For more, Sarah Coles joins us live from Tel Aviv. Sarah, Israeli army radio saying this is the biggest ground incursion to date. Well, regardless of the size, how significant would this be at this point in this conflict?
Hello there, Wei Su. Well, look, the Israeli military says it conducted this relatively large, as you mentioned, ground incursion into the northern part of the Gaza Strip overnight in the early hours of this morning to gather intelligence ahead of a proposed planned ground invasion, which, as you said, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says will happen, calling Hamas operatives dead men walking. Now, we can report that in the last few minutes, the IDF says it has taken out one of Hamas's key rocket men. This is a man who was believed to be operating in Khan Yunis in the southern part of the Strip. We do understand that he was taken out by an airstrike, just a matter of hours ago. Now, look, it really goes to show just how long the Israeli military believes this operation will go on for, given that Benny Gantz there, who is one of the key members of this war cabinet here in Israel, he has told residents of the south that you probably won't be going home for around a year, warning that the security situation in these southern border communities on the Gaza Strip may not be returned to normal for a few years. Now, also the evacuation order, which applies to residents down in the south in these southern communities, also residents in the north on the border with Lebanon, they have been told now that they will not be allowed to go back home until at least December 31st. But look, that could certainly be revised.
Sarah, also a point of contention, the hostages taken in that attack on the 7th of October. The Israeli army has raised its count of those hostages, warning that that number could rise further. What clarity do we have on the number of hostages at this point?
Look, we have learned that there are now 224 hostages reportedly being held in the Gaza Strip by these Hamas operatives. We do know that a lot of world powers are really working to get these people out, working around the clock, just given the number of foreigners that are being held by Hamas. We do understand between Israeli and foreign sources, they say that significant talks are underway to potentially release a large number of these hostages. And look, this is certainly a priority for the Israeli government and also other countries involved in this, given the talk of this potential ground operation happening pretty soon. You know, when you look at the presence of military down on the Gaza border, they simply cannot wait there indefinitely. Now, look, we do understand that possible steps could be taken to facilitate the release of these hostages, and these could potentially be letting in more aid or even giving fuel to the Gaza Strip, which is something that before now, Israel has firmly stood against, saying it simply will not provide fuel shipments into the Gaza Strip, fearing that Hamas would get its hands on it, saying to these aid agencies that have really been calling out for supplies, calling out for fuel, go and ask Hamas for it yourself. So, look, it is really a delicate situation finding this line there between going in and this ground incursion and, as Israel says, wiping out Hamas and then getting these civilians back safely.
All right, thanks for that. Sarah Coates reporting live from Tel Aviv. The foreign minister of the Palestinian Authority has called the latest Israeli strikes on Gaza, quote, a war of revenge, calling for a full ceasefire to allow aid to enter the enclave. He was speaking a day after briefing the International Criminal Court on the current situation in the Gaza Strip. The United Nations has issued a stark warning that nowhere is safe in Gaza as Israeli air raids intensify and its military gets ready for an imminent ground offensive. Parts of the Gaza Strip have been devastated by attacks, leaving neighborhoods in ruins.
المنطقة الجنوبية جنوب الوادي ليست آمنة، فالمجازر صباح مساء متعددة يقتل فيها الأطفال، الصغار، الرضع، كل ما خطر ببالك يقتل الحجر، يقتل الشجر. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. ليست هناك منطقة آمنة في كل قطاع غزة، والجنوب مدمر، الجنوب كل القتل فيه وكل التشييد فيه. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون.
The Palestine Red Crescent Society says it has received 12 trucks from Egypt, all carrying more food, medicine and medical supplies. China also pledging $2 million worth of humanitarian aid to Gaza. Aid groups say the supplies that they have received so far are still not enough. Hospitals are in chaos as they struggle to treat the injured, and their resources are shrinking. The United Nations saying fuel is on the verge of running out in the enclave, with relief efforts scaled down as a consequence of that. A total of 74 trucks have entered the strip since the start of the war, but none with fuel on them. The Israeli military says reports of fuel shortages are inaccurate, accusing Hamas of stockpiling vital resources.
Same claims about lack of equipment and that Gaza may be forced to halt tonight if no fuel is delivered. I don't think that is accurate, and neither does the entire IDF. We responded to UNRWA's claim by referring them to where Hamas, which governs the Gaza Strip, stores fuel, both diesel fuel and other types of and benzene and other types of fuel. It's all inside the Gaza Strip, and there's enough for many days for hospitals and water pumps to run. Only the priorities are different.
Israeli forces also ramping up raids in the occupied West Bank and areas surrounding the Jenin refugee camp. The Palestinian Health Ministry says at least 103 people have died in the area since clashes began earlier this month. As the war enters its 20th day, more than 6,500 people have died in Gaza and more than 17,000 have been injured. In Israel, 1,405 have died and over 5,000 have been injured since the initial attacks by Hamas on Israel on the 7th of October.